So, welcome to Birmingham. This is a introduction to Birmingham, how the city is structured. So, what do you really know about Birmingham? I want to think about what that means for you. What do you understand about the city? What do you know about the city? Um, Firstly, it is a city of 1.1 million people. It's the second biggest city in the UK. Um, there are 35 miles of canals there, so it's got a lovely kind of waterway network, bigger than Venice, which is very famous for that. It's the home of Cadbury's business, which opened in 1879, the city, and it has three universities: University of Birmingham, Birmingham City, and Aston University. So it's a very important city in the context of the UK, and therefore um, we need to understand a little bit more about it. Now, in terms of your exams, you need to know what the situation of Birmingham is. Now, situation is the location of the settlement described in relation to other settlements, rivers, relief features, and transport lines. Now, firstly, you could say, Birmingham is situated within a large road network to the north of to the north is the M6. Um, Secondly, you could also say it's southwest of Nottingham and south of Manchester, between the rivers Trent and Severn, and in the middle of the UK. Um, it's kind of in a very convenient spot. It's very well connected to north and south of the UK, so it's a very important network for getting from the south of England to the north. Most trains go through Birmingham, so therefore it's a very important city in terms of the situation. Now, secondly, we also need to know site. Now, site is the ground on which the settlement stands, described in terms of its physical characteristics. So Birmingham is actually located on a sandstone ridge. That's the geology. So underneath is a sandstone, overlooking a crossing point of the River Ree. So it's on the River Ree, a little river. It's south facing, so it's slightly on a hill, but not on a very steep hill, but it's south facing, and the ground tends to be quite flat around it, with a maximum height above sea level of around 140 meters. So not very high up. So even though it's quite far in, it's still quite a low city. So the structure of city can be split into four different sections: CBD, inner city, suburbs, and rural urban fringe. Now I want you to pause the video and think of 10 different ways the city would change if you went from the CBD all the way out to the rural urban fringe. Now you've done that, we're going to have a look at each different section of the city. Now, firstly, we've got the CBD. This is a central business district. It's the centre of the city. It's the main shopping and service area. Um, there's lots of offices here. People work here. There's lots of traffic, as you can see. Shopping centres, tourist hotspots, museums and things like that. Any kind of service where people come and enjoy themselves, maybe the theatres and things like that as well. The buildings are very tall because the land is so expensive, and that's why you have to build up rather than wide. And that's because you can't really afford to. So yeah, it's where people earn their money. Not many people live there. Secondly, you have the inner city area. Now, this is characterized by either terraced housing or kind of redeveloped um, living blocks, council blocks. Um, this happened a lot in the 70s. Terrace housing was for workers during the Industrial Revolution. You worked in factories, and because it's quite expensive land, houses were built quite small, so they fitted in a lot more people into a small area. Not much open space, and mainly people live in these areas. They might be areas with a higher crime rate, characterized by a lower environmental quality, so might be a bit dirtier and not as nice. Might have some social problems due to the kind of deindustrialization, things like that. So yeah, these are mainly residential areas. The houses are very small, and the land is still quite expensive, so therefore things can be quite small. The next part of the city is the suburbs. Now this is where lots of people live, semi-detached housing, slightly bigger because the land is a bit cheaper. Some of this housing is from Victorian times, while more often than not it's from the 1960s. There's lots more green space, um, maybe more leisure areas. Main land use is made for it's used for residential reasons. So many people mainly live here. There's not much else to do, not much in terms of work and things like that. People mainly live here and commute into the city centre to work. And the final stage is the rural urban fringe. Now, this is right on the edge of the city. So this is characterized by open space. That's a golf course on the top left there. You'll have bigger houses. You might have supermarkets here, but they'll tend to be quite big because people are coming from a wider area to go there to purchase goods. So it's catering for a larger area. And you know, you can afford to build a supermarket that big because the land is a lot cheaper and there's lots more green areas, lots more leisure activities to do. So yeah, that's what the rural urban fringe is. That's what you're going to find right on the edge of the city. Bigger houses, much cheaper land, lots more open space, lots more leisure activities to do. So I'm going to take you through some photos next, and I want you to guess what part of the city each photo is. So as we go through, I want you to think, what part of the city is that? So this is the first one. Now this is the CBD area. It's tall buildings, you know, office buildings, so therefore it is the central business district. This is a inner city area, big tower block flats. You know, they're built up so that lots more people can live there, and it's quite expensive, obviously, so that's why they're building them up. This is a more residential area, so this will be your suburbs because there's slightly more space, gardens and things like that. Now this area is more of a suburb area. Again, there's lots more space around, and therefore people like to live there. It looks lots more residential, front gardens and things. Here we have people cycling. There's a lot more space. It's more like a rural urban fringe area. A lot more green areas around, people doing leisure activities, a lot more spacious, and therefore you can kind of tell it's a bit further away from the city centre. Now this is a large supermarket, and this is located in the rural urban fringe often, so people from a lot further away can come because they're driving to these areas because there might not be good public transport, and the land is cheaper, therefore these supermarkets are a lot bigger, they can afford to be that big. This is a more CBD area. You can tell because this is the shops and kind of services. It's a lot more crammed. It could be in a city area, but it doesn't really look like it because there's a kind of pub and a shop. It looks quite nice as well. Therefore, I would guess it's the CBD area. This is a tourist hotspot. It's a museum, and therefore I would expect it to be in the CBD area as well. This is often where they are. You know, that's where the services are, and the big, maybe you'll find your theatres there and other places that tourists go. So, having looked at those 4 different parts, what part of Birmingham would you like to live in and why? I want you to pause the video here and just explain that in a small paragraph. Justify your reasoning. Just practice. Always justify your reasoning for things. It helps you to remember why you chose something, but also helps you remember the content, which is so vital for the exams. So yeah, use different characteristics as examples. And then we're going to move on to how Birmingham has changed over time. So pause it here, have a go at explaining where would you like to live and why. So, has Birmingham always looked like this? This is the picture of Birmingham on the right. You can see it's kind of spread out, and you can actually see the kind of different parts of the city as you go from the centre of it all the way out. The buildings get lower, land gets cheaper, and things get a bit wider and bigger as you go out. Whereas in the city centre, everything's a bit higher. Yeah, because of the cost of the land changes as you move out from the CBD area out to the rural urban fringe of the city. There are 4 main stages of change. Firstly, urbanisation, which is the increase in percentage of people living in towns and cities, causing them to grow. Secondly, suburbanisation, which is the outward spread of a built-up area, often at a lower density compared to the inner parts. Thirdly, counter-urbanisation. It's the movement of people and employment from major cities to smaller settlements and rural areas located beyond the city. Sorry about the typo there. And then re-urbanisation, the movement of people back towards the city centres away from rural areas and suburbs. These are 4 different stages. Now you can actually plot these 4 different stages on this population line graph of Birmingham. Now, line graphs are really useful to see how things change over time, especially things like population. As you can see from this, Birmingham's population kind of steadily grew during the urbanisation period. Now, urbanisation is obviously when it starts to grow in size, people start moving there and they create this kind of urban area. And up till about 1820, it was growing quite steadily, but not a huge amount. And then during the 1920s and 30s, it grew exponentially. The rate kind of doubled and doubled. You can see there's a massive growth all the way up to 1951. Now, suburbanisation, this is when lots of people were moving to the area and the city was spreading outwards into the suburbs. And then from about when it hits the peak in about 1951-61 time, we've now got a period of counter-urbanisation where people are moving out of the city. And you see the population actually decreases up until 2001, before people start moving back into the city. Now, urbanisation. So why did people move to the cities, or especially Birmingham in the 18th and 19th century? This was mainly to work in the manufacturing industry, in factories making jewellery, guns and brass, especially that's in Birmingham particularly. So lots of jobs are available, and the city grew from 74,000 to 630,000. So kind of like 8 times the amount. So then we get this period of suburbanisation after that, and this is a massive growth of Birmingham. So it had to expand its borders to accommodate all these people. So suburban areas, or the suburbs, grew because the council would build these houses, or privately owned houses would spread out. Most of them were semi-detached, and they're on kind of tree-lined streets that are a lot more leafy and green, with lots of space around them. Now, so then after this suburbanisation period, you've got counter-urbanisation. This is when people actually move out of the city to live a lot more rural life, and there's a variety of reasons. And I want you to pause the video, have a look at the images, and decide what these reasons might be. Okay, so have a look at the images. What push and pull factors for counter-urbanisation are there? Now, push is pushing people out of the city, and pull is attracting people to more rural areas on the edge of the city. So have a look at them and guess what they are. Maybe pause the video at this point, because I'm going to show you some of the answers now. If you didn't get them, write them down, just practice them. So one could be higher rates of congestion and pollution, so this is a push factor out of the city. Higher crime rates might be another one, so you don't want to live in a high crime area. A pull factor would be lower land values in the rural areas, and therefore you can afford the housing there, or a bigger house for more bang for your buck. Thirdly, on the push factors, there's high land values, so it's quite expensive to live in the city areas, and therefore people don't want to live there. They might want to find more affordable housing outside of the city. Another kind of attractive prospect for living in a rural area is less pollution and more open space. Another one is developments in technology. It means people can work from home now. They don't need to go into the office, and therefore you can actually live quite far away from the office in a rural area and just kind of phone into meetings and things like that. So technology allows people to move out and work from home. And lastly, better transport links mean people do not need to live as closely to their workplace as they did before, because trains are so good now. People move out and they can commute in. You can get from Essex into London in about 25 minutes, so therefore you don't actually need to live in London. You can live in Essex and commute in, so that's another pull factor, because better transport links mean people can live further away now. So this is the process of counter-urbanisation, and these are all the reasons why people left Birmingham, and that's why the population dropped so much, to live in more rural areas, because it was that anti kind of city kind of movement, and that's counter-urbanisation. Lastly, we've got re-urbanisation. Now, re-urbanisation is when people are moving back to the city. Now, the main reason for this is redevelopment. Now, this is in the two pictures is a clear example of this. We've got an old Royal Mail office, or kind of a mail sorting office, that was shut down, and then it got redeveloped into this swanky new building with lots of flats and restaurants and bars in it, called the Mailbox. And then this is all part of the generating of the inner city area and CBD area of Birmingham to attract people to live there again, making it an attractive place. So this is called the Big City Plan, and it's a program where £10 billion is invested in Birmingham to improve it, and people are now moving back to the city because it's kind of an attractive place to live now. So, for instance, they've built a new train station for £600 million that better connects the city and the city with other places. So it makes it a more attractive prospect for businesses and people to live there. It's actually a very interesting looking building for a city centre, so it attracts lots of people to have a look at it. The mailbox, which is that example at the top there, that's costs a lot of money, but it's a very attractive building to live in. So, young professionals might want to move back in because it's a nice swanky flat, and they kind of like the services around there and all the new shops and restaurants and things. There's also a library being built, £200 million almost, that will attract people to the city centre. There'll be a place for people to work, students to study, so it's an attractive place to be. And lastly, a new park is being built, so for 12 million, which is going to make Birmingham more green. People can walk their dogs there. It might be cleaner than before. It will just be a place for people to do leisure activities. So some makes the area more attractive for people to live in. So this is all these different investments are working to make people want to move back into the centre of Birmingham, which is really important to ensure that the city continues to make enough money and is prosperous, and those inner city areas don't just go into ruin. So this is a really important way for Birmingham to rebrand itself and make an attractive prospect for people to move back in, and people have moved back in. You can kind of see that in the previous, about 4 slides ago, when we looked at the graph, and there's that quick movement back up in the graph that shows people moving back into the city, quite a few thousand. This is part of the reason why it's a more attractive place for young people to live and work, and therefore it attracts people there. So that's the way that Birmingham has changed. We've now looked at the structure and the way Birmingham has changed. So if you want to have some exam practice, here's some small questions for you to do. So one is explain the reason, one reason for counter-urbanisation. Secondly, describe how a city you have studied is structured. So you need to describe each different area, how it changes from CBD all the way out to a rural urban fringe, and what the reasons for that change. And then describe the situation of a city you have studied in a developed country. So you might be asked in the exam to describe the situation of Birmingham, and it would just come up as this question. It wouldn't ask you for Birmingham, it would say you have studied a city in a developed country. Give us the situation of that. And for 3 marks, you probably have to write 3 sentences describing where Birmingham is situated. I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions in the comments, please, and I can answer them. Right, bye.